Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly genuinely terrifying microscopic threat, hantavirus. We're going to look at exactly how it behaves, why it attacks the human body so violently, and absolutely crucial here, the exact science-backed protocols you need to know to protect yourself. It's a journey that takes us from the invisible intricacies of our own immune system right down to how you clean out your own garage. So, let's get into it.
Now, when I say hantavirus, what actually pops into your head? For most of us, it's a very specific scene. Imagine the classic setting: a dusty, abandoned rural cabin, maybe a remote shed that hasn't been cracked open in years. You walk in, kick up a bunch of dust, and boom, that's where the danger is. It kind of feels like a threat reserved exclusively for the deep wilderness or neglected backwoods properties, right?
Well, scratch that, because the truth actually completely subverts those expectations. The threat is sometimes much closer and way more unexpected than we like to think. Recently, the World Health Organization reported a multi-country cluster of hantavirus linked directly to a cruise ship, the MV Hondius. Passengers were traveling in tight quarters, far, far away from any dusty cabin, yet they were exposed. It's a stark reminder that as humans push into different environments, zoonotic diseases, the ones that jump from animals to humans, can just hitch a ride right along with us.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The unexpected outbreak. 2. Two syndromes. 3. The cytokine storm. 4. Safe rodent cleanup. And 5. Vehicles and heavy infestations.
Section 1. Two syndromes, one reaction.
Now, what's really interesting is that hantavirus doesn't just cause one type of illness. Depending on where you happen to be on the globe, the disease presents in two radically different clinical forms. On one side, we have HPS, or Hantavirus Pulmonary Syndrome. This is primarily found in the Americas. Virologists call these the New World hantaviruses, like the Sin Nombre or Andes viruses. HPS goes straight for your lungs, causing severe pneumonia, respiratory distress, and eventually cardiovascular shock. On the flip side, over in Europe and Asia, we have HFRS, hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. These are the old world hantaviruses, like the Pumallovirus. Instead of the lungs, HFRS targets the kidneys, causing renal dysfunction and, as you probably guessed from the name, internal bleeding. So we are looking at two totally different physiological targets.
But here is the stark reality that really lands a heavy punch. The mortality rates between these two syndromes, they are drastically different. HFRS, that old world variant, has a mortality rate of about 0.4%. So it's serious, sure, but highly survivable. HPS, on the other hand, the New World variant, found right here in the Americas, carries a staggering 39.3% mortality rate. Think about that for a second. Almost 4 out of 10 people who contract HPS will not survive. This massive discrepancy begs a pretty huge scientific question. Why on earth is HPS so incredibly deadly?
Section 2. The cytokine storm.
To wrap our heads around that 39.3% mortality rate, we've got to shift our focus from the geographical map down to a microscopic battlefield right inside the human body. Because here is the ultimate irony of hantavirus. The virus itself doesn't actually kill your cells. Seriously, in vitro studies show that hantaviruses aren't directly cytopathic. They target endothelial cells. Those are the cells lining your blood vessels, but they don't actually destroy them. Instead, the virus pulls a massive trick. It tricks your body into turning its own defenses against itself. This triggers what's known as a cytokine storm. It is a severe, cascading immune overreaction. Your body basically panics, floods the system with inflammatory cytokines, and it is this massive, totally unregulated inflammation that causes the fatal tissue damage and vascular leakage we see in HPS.
And this brilliantly illustrates the point. This data, drawn from a major study published in Frontiers in Immunology, compares the serum cytokine profiles of patients. Just look at the difference. In HFRS, the milder disease, 21 different cytokines are upregulated. It's a pretty modest immune response. But in HPS, the severe disease, a whopping 40 cytokines are upregulated. On top of that, HPS triggers a massive spike in a specific marker called IL-18. This leads to a highly aggressive T1-type immune and natural killer cell response. Put simply, your body essentially brings a nuclear bomb to a knife fight, and that collateral damage to your lungs, that's exactly what makes HPS so lethal.
Section 3. Safe rodent cleanup protocols.
So knowing the immense power of this microscopic enemy, how do we actually protect ourselves out in the real physical world?
Because let's face it, prevention is literally the only true cure we have. If you take absolutely nothing else away from this explainer today, let it be this. When you encounter rodent droppings, urine, or nesting materials, do not vacuum, do not sweep. Hantavirus has transmitted to humans primarily through aerosolized particles. If you run a vacuum over infected droppings, you are instantly aerosolizing millions of deadly viral droplets straight into the air you are breathing. Sweeping does the exact same thing. It is the single most common mistake people make, and it is unbelievably dangerous.
Instead of dry cleaning, you have to use wet cleaning methods. Here are the exact steps straight from the CDC. First things first, put on rubber or plastic gloves, no exceptions. Second, mix up a potent bleach solution. The exact ratio you need is 1.5 cups of household bleach to 1 gallon of water. Spray the droppings and the entire surrounding area until it is genuinely soaking wet. Step 3 is absolutely crucial. Let it soak for 5 full minutes. Do not rush this part, okay? The bleach literally needs that time to deactivate the virus. And finally, wipe it all up with paper towels and toss them straight into a covered garbage can.
Okay, but what about handling dead rodents, or those traditional snap traps? Well, the protocol is just as strict. First, while wearing your gloves, submerge the entire trap, rodent and all, into a bucket of your disinfectant for 5 minutes. After the soak, hold the trap over a plastic bag, lift the bar, and just let the rodent drop right in. Then, double bag it. Tie the first bag, drop it into a second bag, and tie that one up securely. If you're planning on reusing the trap, rinse it off well and let it dry completely. And always, always wash your hands thoroughly with soap and warm water the second you take those gloves off.
Section 4. Tackling vehicles and infestations. Now let's see how this builds, because it's not always just a few stray droppings in a dark corner. Sometimes we're dealing with larger, much more complex environments. Vehicles, for example, are a surprisingly common place to find hantavirus. Mice absolutely love to build nests in cars, trucks, and campers that just sit idle for a while. And there's a real cognitive dissonance here, right? We just don't expect a deadly virus in our everyday commute. But if a vehicle has been sitting, here's what you do. Open the doors, open the trunk, pop the hood, and step away. Let the whole thing air out for a minimum of 20 minutes before you even think about starting the engine. Inspect the air intakes, check the cabin filters for nests, and just like inside a house, spray everything down with disinfectant before you even attempt to remove any material.
Finally, if you're dealing with a really heavy infestation, say entering a vacant dwelling with large numbers of rodents, those standard rubber gloves under the sink just aren't going to cut it. The CDC mandates heavy-duty personal protective equipment for this. You're going to need disposable coveralls, rubber boots, protective goggles, and most importantly, an appropriate respiratory protection device. We're talking a half-mask air purifying respirator with a HEPA filter, or a PAPR. You are entering a highly contaminated environment, and you need to completely seal yourself off from those aerosolized particles.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that hantavirus bridges the gap between fascinating microscopic immunology and the very real dust sitting in your garage right now. It is a terrifying masterclass in how our own immune system can sometimes be our worst enemy, and a stark reminder of the massive power of simple, effective hygiene. Which leaves me with one final thought for you to ponder. Think about that camper you haven't used since last summer, or maybe that storage shed in the backyard. When was the very last time you actually aired out your vehicle or cabin for 20 minutes before stepping inside? It's a simple step, but as we've seen today, it could quite literally save your life. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and stay safe out there.